All right, and I think we're live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to State of React, where we get to collaborate with amazing people from the React 18 working group and other library maintainers in the community. I'm really excited to talk with them and have you all listen to them today. Um, this event, of course, is sponsored by the Stat Labs, and we're currently hiring. We'd love for you to come work with us. Definitely reach out at jobs@thestat.co if you're interested. We do full stack web development in the modern web technology space. So anything JavaScript, especially React related. I'm word fumbling already. Um, and these are just a few of our amazing clients that we get to work with, and you should definitely consider coming to work with us. Um, but you're not here to learn about that. You're here to learn about what's coming up in the community and what's happening in React. So a few amazing events coming up in the near future. We have monthly mentoring with Women in Tech tomorrow, and then that's kind of the end of the year, and then we're into 2022 already. Can you believe it? It's that time of the year. So in January we have State of Headless CMS, which I think we're going to hear some interesting things about the state of CMSs, and we were just talking about the bleeding edge today, and deploying to the edge, should I say. And then more monthly mentoring and the State of GraphQL will be in February. So definitely come check out those events. Um, I'm your host, Dustin Goodman. I'm an engineering manager at the Stat Labs, and I am here happy to present with these amazing hosts who are going to introduce them, or not hosts, guests who are going to introduce themselves. Starting with Shaundai.
Hi, everyone. I am Shaundai Person. I'm a senior software engineer at Netflix. I'm based in Atlanta, Georgia, in the United States. I'm also a leader in React Ladies, which it's called React Robins now, but we are a community dedicated to the personal and professional development of women and non-binary folk who are React enthusiasts, use React in their daily work as well. So if you're interested, check out React Robins on Twitter or check out our website. That's me.
Hey, hello everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm Aakansha. I work at Excalidraw, and yeah, I love open source. I'm part of the React 18 working group. Yeah, excited for the panel discussion happening today. That's me.
Hey everybody, I'm Ben Lesh. I am the RxJS core team lead. I used to be on the Angular team, but I work pretty much exclusively in React these days. So I'm here to tell you a little bit about RxJS, and I'm looking forward to it.
I'm Tanner Linsley. I created something called the Tan Stack, which is just the outlet for my open source obsession. I'm the VP of UI and UX at Nozzle.io, where we are reverse engineering Google search rankings. Kind of fun. Yeah, really excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Hello, I'm Dominik. I'm based in Vienna, Austria, which is in Europe, and I'm the front-end tech lead at Verity. And also I got into open source end of last year during the pandemic as part of a hobby. And yeah, this got more and more. And right now I'm one of the maintainers for ReactQuery, which is a library of the Tan stack created by Tanner.
Hi everyone, my name is Delba and I'm a developer advocate at Vercel. In my day-to-day job, I write, create videos, interact with the community, and help developers use React and Next.js.
Hi, I'm Mark Erikson. I work on a whole bunch of Redux-related stuff and tweet about how much TypeScript is annoying me.
Hey everyone, my name is Ian Sutherland. I'm one of the maintainers of Create React app. Also work on Node.js, and I'm one of the engineering leads at Neo Financial, which is a Canadian fintech startup.
And I don't believe Peter was able to join us yet. But if he jumps in, we'll get to hear a little bit more about Redwood today. Really exciting, though. So moving on to kind of our next section of this, let's talk about some of the libraries you all are maintaining. We have some very popular library maintainers here. We're going to let Mark go last because he's going to show the rest of us up. We've already discussed. Maybe we could hear first from Tanner. I know you got a lot of projects.
Sure, I do have a lot of projects. The most notable one is ReactQuery, and I'm actually going to leave that update to Dominik because he has been doing some awesome stuff with ReactQuery. And I've kind of had my head in other projects lately. I released React Location this last month, which is a router alternative to React Router. It's got some fun features in there. I've been in the middle of a React table rewrite for, it seems, 2 years, moving everything over to TypeScript, and Mark knows all the crazy things that we've been trying to do with TypeScript lately. Other than that, I don't have a ton of updates on any other libraries. I'm mostly just excited to hear about ReactQuery from Dom. So,
well, with that intro, let's let Dom do it.
All right, thank you, Tanner. I have something to share, even though it's not slides or something. Let me see if this works. Let's do a window, this one. I hope that works. Can you see this? So this is, yes, awesome. This is ReactQuery version 4, which we released last week, the first alpha version of it, something we've been working on for the last couple of months with some exciting new features. Leading the pack is a new network mode, where we've discovered that in version 3, we're still taking some assumptions of whether you are connected to the internet or not. So some features are tied to that, like, for example, pausing retries or the refetch on window focus. And ReactQuery in general is most often used for data fetching, but it's also actually a asynchronous state manager that just needs promises. So it's not really tied to data fetching at all. There is, especially with version 4, then nothing that ties you to a working network connection if you're opting out with that new network mode. And also, per default, we're still going to set this network mode to online, which means you are going to need a running network connection because, as I said, ReactQuery is mostly used for data fetching. But also, we have hidden that somehow in our internals that this is happening. And with the new version, we are going to actually expose it to you as a user of the library so that you have full control over when a query is actually fetching or when it is paused for some reason, because, for example, it doesn't have internet connection. And I do have a little example prepared here. This is just our usual post list example with post details that I have forked and put onto the ReactQuery version 4. And what you can see is down here that we're seeing a little updating in background. It's really fast, but if you focus the window, it is updating in the background. I hope that you can somehow see that. Now that the new dev tools also have a little button that lets you emulate that you're not having network connection for ReactQuery. It doesn't do anything to your real network connection, but it's going to put ReactQuery into the offline emulated mode, which means that when you then try to refetch the query, you can see it's going actually into a pause state, which is also exposed to you. You can then display different things. So all the queries, everything will still work, except that those fetches are actually paused, and they will then continue as soon as you go online again with your real internet connection. So this is something that we've been working on a lot lately for version 4 to kind of streamline the behavior of how ReactQuery works and where it makes assumptions about refetches and stuff like that. The other big thing is probably tracked queries per default, which is a feature that we've added as a minor release somewhere in version 3, which lets you basically optimize how your component re-renders that is subscribed to a query. So if you were to not use this is fetching property, then your component wouldn't even re-render if we are refetching the data in the background unless something has really changed in the data that you're using. And we're just trying to smartly track all the properties that you are using from your use query hook or the custom hook above it, and then don't inform this component about updates unless there is something that this component is interested in. And this was an opt-in feature in version 3 already, but it's now been moved as the default, and it's now actually you have to opt out if you don't want that for some reason. Yeah, and I can say that the list of breaking changes looks long, but it's not actually a lot. So we've just tried to streamline the APIs a little bit. It's going to get a little bit longer still, but it's not as big as a breaking change as version 3 was in terms of API surfaces. Most of the things are internals, like renaming a directory or streamlining some events that you're probably not using if you're just using queries. So the update should be rather smooth. And yeah, I'm looking forward to people trying out the library, giving feedback so that we can move to a beta version soon and hopefully to a stable release somewhere next year. And the last thing that I want to mention would probably be, because I don't have this in the features, is that we have made our Persist query client plugins stable. So we've had them for, I think, about a year, so that you can persist your query client with your queries and mutations to storages like local storage, web storage, or async storage. We provide those functions. They were in an experimental state in version 3, but people have been using them for months with no problems. We've just decided to, we have a good API and make them stable and let even more people use them. All right, I think that's all I got.
That's an incredible update right there. Thank you for sharing that with us. Before we move on, Tanner, I'm coming back to you for a second because the audience actually had a question for you, which is, can you talk a little bit more about React Locator? Somebody had some interest to know more about what that is.
Yeah, React Location. It actually has nothing to do with geolocation or location. It just turns out that React Router was taken. So it's an alternative router in the React ecosystem. If you're familiar with the new version 6 of React Router, it'll probably look very similar. It has some different features though. So it's fully asynchronous, meaning that you can have asynchronous elements, meaning code splitting or asynchronous imports of elements. You can also have data loaders that look very purposely similar to something you would find in like Remix. So you can actually, specify all of your data requirements up front in your route configurations. And there's a lot of other features around asynchronous loading. The other big thing about React Location is I made a really, really big push to make search params very first class in the entire library. So, if you know me, I'm on this big crusade to kind of separate all the different types of state and make sure that people can update them well. We have app state and server state with ReactQuery, and heaven forbid I write a global state manager. I will not do that. Just use Zustand or Zhoutai or something like that. But another part of the state that we often forget is location state in the URL. And this current crusade I'm on is that if more people stored state in the URL instead of in application memory, that the world would definitely be a better place. And we've been able to do this for a long time, but it's been very difficult with our current APIs. You have to end up doing a lot of stringifying and parsing, and it's a chore. So React Location makes it as easy to store state in the URL and update it as you would use an API like useState or useReducer from React. It's just like interacting with some JSON in the URL. And it is super convenient. I'm using it at Nozzle because we have dashboards with 10, 20 widgets on screen, and each widget has options, and everything's stored in the URL. So anything you change, you can share that URL to a team member, and it's exactly how it's going to show up on their screen. We actually store very little state in application memory now. So very excited about that part of it. And that's the biggest reason why I built it. So that's React Location, not location-based stuff. It's a router. So
awesome. Ian, would you like to go next and give us a Create React App update?
Sure, yeah. So I've got a short, but I think pretty exciting update on Create React App. We just released Create React App 5 this morning, like about an hour ago. And so, yeah, some of the big features there, we've upgraded to the latest major version of all of our key dependencies. So that's Webpack 5, Just 27, PostCSS 8, ESLint 8, and a bunch of other upgrades. We've also got a bunch of fast refresh improvements and bug fixes in this release. We have out-of-the-box support for Tailwind now. We've improved our package manager detection. So if you npx create React app, we'll use npm in your project. If you yarn create or DLX, we'll use yarn. Those are some of the main features that we just released, and then we've already started on a 5.1 release as well, which is going to include support for module federation, as well as experimental support for SWC. So that should be coming soon. And I just want to say a big shout out to all of the maintainers and contributors that helped out with this release.
That's an amazing update as well. Oof, lots of releases. Speaking of major releases as well, I know Next.js had one not too long ago. Delba, you want to tell us a little bit more?
Yes, for sure. So in October, we had Next.js Conf, where we released version 12 of Next.js. And there were a couple of features that we released, but I'll share with you the 3 that I'm most excited about. So the first one is middleware. And for anyone watching, you probably know about middleware from tools like Express.js. And like the name suggests, middleware is something that you run between 2 things. So in the context of Next.js, we can run code between the user's request and when that request completes. And this allows us to actually implement quite a couple of features in our Next.js applications, like A/B testing, bot protection, etc. So we're very excited about that, especially because when you consider middleware, you're running it for many user requests. So middleware needs to be fast, and it needs to be globally distributed, and it needs to be affordable. So with the way that we've designed middleware in Next.js, it uses a very small web runtime, which allows us to globally distribute it. And with Vercel, so middleware is deployed as edge functions on Vercel, and this allows us to not have to worry about, configuring the infrastructure to run our code at the edge. And the great thing about it is that you also don't have to use Next.js. You can use a framework of your choice in the future to be able to run middleware in your application. So that's the first one. The second one that we're very excited about is our Next.js compiler. So the Next.js compiler is built on Rust, which is a low-level programming language. And we have found that after adopting Rust, we've had quite a few positive performance results. For example, build times, fast refresh, etc. And this compiler is also built on top of SWC, which, just for anyone who's not familiar with it, it's a Rust-based platform that can do things like bundling, compiling, etc. So Tim and the rest of the Next.js team, they have been doing a really great job at listening to our users' feedback and helping them migrate to our new Next.js compiler. For example, we recently implemented support for styled components and also for Jest, which I'm personally very excited about because I know that with Create React App, this is something that users get out of the box. So I'm really happy that we're kind of working towards that as well with Next.js. So yeah, and then the third one would be support for React 18. So in the past couple of months, the Next.js team has been working with the React team to make sure that Next.js is ready for the new features of React 18. And at the moment, the server-side aspects of it, like, for example, suspense or React server components, are in alpha in an experimental flag, but users can still try it out and see how it works with Next.js. So yeah, those are the kind of like the 3 main things that I'm most excited about in the Next.js world in relation to React.
Those are some pretty amazing updates. And I know there's more coming because I know Mark has something to tell us about the state of Redux.
Indeed, I do. I will attempt to share my screen here. Let's see, what main screen? Okay, so we've had a lot going on in the Redux world over the last few months. On Friday, we just shipped Redux Toolkit 1.7. In 1.6, we released our new ReactQuery data fetching API, which, kudos to Tanner and Dominik, was highly inspired by ReactQuery, among other things. And Lens Weber has been very busy dealing with various user requests that came in after the first release of ReactQuery. And so in RTK 1.7, we've added some new APIs that try to enable SSR support in various ways. When you define an API endpoint, you can now specify how you want to handle rehydration of data for SSR scenarios. And we have an example that works with Next and the Next Redux wrapper library to show how you could do SSR and hydration in the Next app. And I believe the documentation also shows an example of how you might do that in a non-Next based SSR scenario. There's also a couple new bits in there that we can hopefully use to add some React suspense support down the road. So it's not in there yet, but hopefully we can build on that as we go. The library has a whole bunch of other API improvements. A lot of people ask for the ability to see mutation results in multiple components at once, so you could trigger an update in one component, but be able to show some status in another component. One of the complaints that's popped over the years has been that if you have two different slice files and they want to handle actions from each other, you can end up with a circular dependency issue that breaks the code. And Lens was able to restructure how create slice initializes things so that it actually doesn't generate the reducer until a little bit later, and that sidesteps the circular dependency problem. We've got a whole bunch of other bug fixes and improvements, and we also updated to the latest versions of Reselect and Redux Thunk, and I'll talk about the Reselect changes in just a second. I wrote a couple new pages for the Redux Essentials docs tutorial, which add an explanation of ReactQuery to that tutorial. So it now covers all of the stuff that's in Redux Toolkit. Also, someone from the community contributed a new ReactQuery specific monitor for the Redux DevTools. I don't believe that's live yet because the person who's maintaining the DevTools is also doing a larger DevTools extension 3.0 release that I think is in beta right now. But that view will show you all the details of all the requests, all the cache data, and the API status in the app. And in general, ReactQuery seems to be getting adopted very enthusiastically. I don't have any hard numbers on that, but I can tell you that anecdotally, we are getting a ton of questions in Reactiflux and on Stack Overflow. So there's definitely a lot of people who are picking it up. I did a lot of work on Reselect over the last couple months. It had kind of been sitting there really unmaintained for about the last 3 years, and a whole pile of issues and PRs had stacked up. And so I was able to go in and add some new capabilities, work on the TypeScript types. The two biggest things I want to point out, previously to customize some of the behavior like equality checks, you had to call this separate create selector creator function, which you would then use to customize the options. And create selector itself now has the ability to pass through customization options. And the default customization behavior now has the ability to specify cache sizes larger than 1, how you do basic equality checks, and the ability to check the result output. Like a common scenario was, I want to select the IDs of all the to-dos in this array, but if you update any of the to-dos, it ends up having to recalculate the array. Even though the contents are the same, it's a new reference. So you can now do an equality check on the output so that it returns the old array if the contents haven't changed. I also went through and pulled in some PRs that completely updated the TypeScript types. That did a lot of improvements and also probably broke things. So if you look at the release notes, it's like 4.11, 4.12, 4.13, as I've been playing whack-a-mole trying to fix the types. And honestly, I've been right at the edge of what I actually know with TypeScript, so I've had to repeatedly beg for help from people smarter than me. The good news is that the types are much smarter and do a lot better job of inferring all the inputs from the input functions. And as a quick example of what this looks like, we now have this monstrous type in the middle of our code. The type itself is like 20 lines, and I had to add like 30 lines of comments just to explain what's going on here, because otherwise I won't be able to remember what it's actually doing. The other big thing that's going on is React Redux version 8. So React 18 is a big deal, and we always try to keep React Redux up to date with what the React team is doing. We also decided it was finally time to convert our own code base to TypeScript. Previously, all the types were maintained by the community, and we're doing some cleanup as well. So the TypeScript conversion is complete. We got a ton of help from the community on that one, and I really appreciate everyone who helped pitch in on that effort. We've removed a very rarely used API called Connect Advanced and a internal behavior option that no one actually used anymore. And we've updated the build output to target a more modern JavaScript syntax. But the majority of the work has been around compatibility with React 18. If you're interested in knowing a lot more detail on the topic, there was a good talk by Daishi Kato at ReactConf about this idea of tearing and this new use sync external store hook that the React team added. React Redux was really the test bed for that. We had a number of very good discussions with the React team about what React Redux needed to work properly. And the React team basically built a new API with the intent that any library could use it, but we used React Redux as the test bed under the assumption that if it solves our problems, it should work great for everybody else too. So had some very good back and forth with Andrew Clark there. Like I would make an update to my PR, tell Andrew, I need this other option. Can you add this other option, please? And like a couple of days later, he'd push a new release that added that. I originally planned that React Redux version 8 would only work with React 18, but I was convinced to add an alternate entry point that should still work with React 16 and 17 as well. And so this is in beta, and we would really appreciate people trying this out with React 18 and giving us feedback. And then the last thing to mention is we've been playing around with this new experimental listener middleware for RT and for Redux Toolkit. RTK has always shipped with the Thunk middleware by default, and that's good for like basic data fetching and stuff like that. But it doesn't let you respond to dispatched actions. And so typically you've had to use like the Redux Saga or Redux Observable. And those are very, very powerful and great for very complex use cases. But there wasn't like a simple way to handle this without writing a custom middleware. So we've been trying to build something that lets you run some fairly simple callbacks when actions are dispatched or state changes. And we've actually been growing it a little bit. We figured out that by adding some small primitives, we can do some of the same kinds of things you would with sagas or observables, but with a lot smaller API and bundle size. So we're still iterating on the API. This is in alpha. We would love to have people try it out and give us feedback on use cases or the API design so we can try to nail this down and ship it in a future release of Redux Toolkit. So lots of stuff going on our end at the moment.
Yeah, that's not just a little bit right there. And last but not least, of course, is Ben Lesh and RxJS. What's going on over there?
I don't even know. Hold on. Let me get up my slides. Right. Should have been more prepared for this.
I can sing while you
hats off, Mark, to the typings thing. We went through that ourselves, and typing functional libraries with TypeScript is a bit of a bear. So let's see.
Yeah, the monster type that I showed earlier is basically trying to do the equivalent of a types level array dot map with a bunch of transformations. Yeah.
All right. Hopefully everybody sees this okay. So really quick, I want to give some updates on what's going on with ArcsJS 7. I know I speak a lot to the Angular folks about this, but not really enough to the React folks. I'm really thankful for the opportunity to do this because arguably we may have more React users now than Angular users, which is pretty crazy if you consider that everyone that uses Angular pretty much uses ArcsJS. Again, I'm the ArcsJS lead. My name is Ben Lesh. Was at Citadel. I'm a free agent now. Before that, I was at Google and Netflix. I see a fellow Netflixer in here. There aren't many of us, so hello. The biggest thing that I want people to know is if you have a React app that you're bundling and you're using ArcsJS 6, that's fine. We're still supporting 6. However, I would highly recommend you update to ArcsJS 7, especially if you've kept TypeScript up to date and those sorts of things, because it is almost half the size and it has more functionality. So this was all done via refactor, not via like a big bang rewrite or anything. It's ArcsJS 7 is very heavily battle tested. Google uses it in production in a number of its properties and has been for more than a year. It's out there. It's great. You should definitely switch to it. The typings are a lot better. So similar to what Mark was talking about with Redux, a good chunk of the changes in ArcsJS 7 was around fixing types. So it does require TypeScript 4.2 and higher in order for us to get the features we needed to type a functional library like this. We also, in ArcsJS 7.2 and above, have switched to top-level exports. And this helps a lot. I discovered recently, even with some of the features of Visual Studio Code with auto imports and that sort of thing, you get things a lot more simply and cleanly when you're dealing with your typable operators. The other thing is we're trying to simplify multicasting. So before, if you're not familiar with this, it's okay. If you are familiar with this, you're probably ecstatic. Before, if you wanted to multicast an observable, that is to have more than one thing listening to the same observed value, there were about 12 different ways to do it. We've narrowed it down to really about 3. And the primary one is something everybody's familiar with, which is share. And we've made it more explicit. So you can see like, oh, I'm sharing through this type of subject. And I'm going to reset the subject either on complete, or in this case, we're saying we're not resetting it if it completes, but we are resetting it if it errors. And we're not resetting it if ref count equals 0. And that's ref count at 0 is, it's a bit hairy to read if you're not familiar, but the idea is as everyone that subscribed to it unsubscribes, if those consuming subscriptions get to 0, we can reset the underlying connection. So anyways, we've simplified all that to be more explicit and all in one spot instead of spread out a bunch of amongst a bunch of weird function calls. There's also a cleaner way to make a connectable observable. This is kind of edge casey, but before it required casting and stuff in TypeScript, it was really annoying. So it's also very configurable like share is. So it's something to know about. Here's a big one that actually was spawned by things I was doing at work. So in a React app, this is we're improved the retry ergonomics. Basically, sometimes you have a stream, and when it disconnects for any reason, for an error reason rather, you want to reconnect it. And we had the ability to retry with fancy ways with retry when. But what you can do now is you can say, I retry. I'm going to allow 3 attempts at reconnection. If we get one successful error through or message through, we want to reset that count. And then I want to retry on a delay of 2 seconds, right? So this is much more configurable. The delay is the big addition here. And you can also pass a function to it that you can return any observable type or a promise or whatever you want, like from this. So here I've got a timer that is, I have a timer that's an observable. I could use an async function here if I wanted, or whatever I like. But the point is I can do something like this where I've got like an exponential back off, and it supplies to you the error so you can check it. It also gives you the number of attempts so far, so you can do a little bit of math if you need to. So you can do some really interesting things very cleanly. And what you would have to do before looks something like this. And it's, you know, so small in this slide you can barely read it. And it's ugly, and you'd have to comment it, and the next person that comes along would be like, what the hell, RxJS is stupid, I hate it. And we don't want that. So back to this, much cleaner, much better. Another thing that we added in version 7 is this animation frames observable. So one thing that people use RxJS for sometimes is doing interesting things where you can say this observable is an animation, and I'm going to concatenate them together. I'm going to switch between them or merge them together, whatever. And you can kind of coordinate animations, because animations are streams of updates to your view. And what we have now is this animation frames observable that gives you the elapsed high resolution elapsed time and the timestamp that you would get from a request animation frame. And you can do whatever you like with it. So it's fun to play with. And here I've got an example to show you. This was all written with RxJS. And I've got the example. I can put it up on StackBlitz. This is something you can do with React. It's something you can do with pretty much anything that can take a number and render DOM. So super, super fun. I'll make sure to post the slides afterwards so people can see that StackBlitz and play with it. Another thing that was added that was something that was really requested, and weirdly, the first request for this was 6 years ago from the Relay team, was that now in TAP, which is meant for checking what an observable is doing, so you can have side effects or whatever, we have 3 new things, which is a subscribe callback. So that happens the instant someone subscribes, you get an event that you can handle. Unsubscribe, this is the one that the Relay team wanted, which is an event that tells you if all of your consumers, or if your consumer has unsubscribed, rather, like this will fire, and it won't fire if you complete or error. So that's different. So this is if the downstream user says, I no longer want this. And then the final one is just finalize. So that's like a finally, it always fires whether you error or complete or unsubscribe, it'll fire right after. So just new ways to kind of observe what's happening inside of an observable. We also added async iterable support, and this is pretty fun. Async iterable is async function star. It returns an iterator of promise. And now you can just natively, any API inside of RxJS that takes an observable or takes a promise will also now take this async iterable. So you can do some cool things with it. You can make a ticker this way, or you can also pass an async function star directly, an async generator function, to an API like defer or even switch map, concat map, those sorts of things. And a lot of times when people are familiar with RxJS and I show them this, they're like, whoa, you can do that? I didn't know you could do that. But in fact, the async iterable part's the only new thing. You could always return any observable, any promise, any iterable, even an array from any API that accepts an observable in RxJS. So it's a very interesting and clean way to make sure these things are passed. And an interesting thing about this is iterables and async iterables. We're handling those in such a way that we make sure they're cleaned up afterwards if you unsubscribe. So it makes kind of a nice, clean overall API to make sure you're handling memory properly. If you only use it for that, if you're not using all the operators and stuff that RxJS provides. So there's just tons of new great stuff. If you're already using RxJS and you're also using like Axios or something else to do your Ajax stuff, I highly recommend looking into using our new and improved Ajax API or our from fetch API, because they're really lightweight. It's if you're already using RxJS, then it's only going to add like an additional 3 kilobytes or something to use our Ajax implementation, and it's very full featured. It is now geared to kind of rival the capabilities of something like Axios. It's not geared for the server-side rendering part of that yet, but happy to look at contributions around that if anyone wants to look into that. The other thing that I was looking at is we're up over 30 million downloads per week. And this is significant because if you were to compare this, and I don't have it in the slide, but if you were to compare this to the overall usage in, say, Angular, which is what most people associate RxJS with, it is substantially more, like 30 times more or something like that. And a lot of it is coming from React community. Node community uses this a lot with CLI tools and stuff like that. So it's a metric. It's not the greatest metric in the world, but it is interesting. And I just have a couple of points in here where this is things kind of ticked up like that when we switched to more functional programming for our operators and that sort of thing. So thanks. That's all I have for updates. Please do, if you are using RxJS with React, I highly recommend switching to RxJS 7 as soon as possible, at least so you get the bundle size reduction and a lot of these great features that we've added. So thanks.
Thank you, Ben. And I think the update that we've all been really looking forward to is the React 18. We're in release candidates. Really excited. Aakansha, Shaundai, do y'all want to tell us a little bit about what's going on over there? We're really excited to have both of you here and learn more about what's been happening in the working group.
Sure, I can go first. So and let me start off by saying I'm not part of the React team. I work at Netflix. I'm a UI engineer and a React enthusiast, but I did give a talk at ReactConf a week ago. And my talk was on the new suspense architecture in React 18. So I was working with Dan Abramoff and Rick Hanlon, amazing, brilliant people who made sure that I had everything. I had a really good understanding of server-side rendering, and I thought I understood it, but I got a much better understanding of it through working with them and iterating on this talk. So the talks are all live on YouTube now, and we can put the link in the comments for anybody who's interested. But my talk is 20 minutes long, so I'm not going to give you the full version here, just the abbreviated version and the updates. But if you don't know anything about server-side rendering compared to client-side rendering, the beginning of the talk goes through the differences and what to expect, as well as the problems that are in pre-React 18 React that are solved in React 18. And so mainly when it comes to the new suspense architecture, now there is the ability to serve your components asynchronously. So in pre-React 18 React, there are different steps in the server-side render process. You have to fetch the data for the entire application. You have to render the entire application to HTML. You have to load the JavaScript for the entire application, and then you have to hydrate the entire application. If there is a component, like it is the case in any non-trivial React application, let's say there's a component that's holding things up because it has maybe large amounts of data or really heavy JS code that takes a long time to load. That component that takes a long time, it's going to hold up the rest of the process for the entire app because everything needs to happen at once, all in one pass. What suspense allows you to do is it's a component that allows you to say, okay, React, you can carry on with the process for all of the rest of the components that are moving a lot quicker. And then for the one that is wrapped in suspense, which is going to be the one that's holding everything up, give the user an indicator, a loading spinner, or what is called as a fallback prop. So you can say, all right, this is for the user to know that we're expecting something back. But we don't have to hold up the process for everything else. And then when that piece of the app that takes a long time finally comes back, all of that code is sent back to that same stream, rendered to HTML. The JavaScript is loaded. And that process happens for this little piece of the application on its own. So there's a new API, and there'll be documentation when React reaches a stable release, that there's a new API called render to pipeline stream that you'll use in the root of your React app that gives you access to this new architecture. So all of this kind of happens automatically. And if you're using a framework like Delba mentioned about Next.js, if you're using like a Gatsby or Next.js, probably these changes will just come for you under the hood. So it's not even anything that you really have to think about. It's just something that you have access to. So now as a developer, you get access to kind of, it's a design concept, really. It gives you the ability to not have to think about, okay, while things are loading, let's make sure that this piece of the app is respected, or it shows up in the right place. Like Suspense does all the thinking for you and just make sure that the fallback is in the right place. And then when that code comes back, or the HTML, or sorry, the data comes back, it all goes to the right place. So you don't have to worry about, from a UI perspective, where things need to go. So again, all out of the box. And there'll be more updates when React 18 reaches a stable release.
You didn't quite unmute, Aakansha. No worries.
Yeah, am I audible now? Yeah, okay, sorry for that. Yeah, so yeah, I think Shaundai, I think you gave a great explanation, great talk at ReactConf. So yeah, I gave a talk about what are the new things in React 18 at React India, where Rick and Dan helped me a lot in like understanding things clearly and preparing the talk as well. And in ReactConf, I just gave a talk about what's happening in the working group and how was the working group collaboration helped out in improving the React 18 release. So I think to add on what Shaundai said, there are more improvements coming in, like automatic batching is one of those, which will be basically out-of-box improvements as soon as you upgrade to React 18. Apart from selective hydration and HTML streaming, concurrent features are going to be shipped for the first time, which are opt-in. So whenever you upgrade to React 18, you can actually experiment with parts of your application with the concurrent features and try out the concurrent rendering. And concurrent rendering is actually going to improve the way we will be thinking, because it's like probably apart from the user events like a click or a type, all these places you would want to use concurrent rendering so as to improve the user experience. So I think there are two APIs which are going to be shipped. One is start transition, and the another is use value. So basically, to give a brief overview of these two APIs, start transition is basically going to give us control on which updates we want to defer, basically which state updates we are going to defer, and use deferred value on the other side is going to give you a deferred version of that value. So it's kind of a use cases based on the use cases where you want to use these two APIs. So start transition will probably be applicable, let's say when you are navigating from one page to another. It's like a transition. It's like a transition you are showing, or you have some expensive update going on which you want to mark as a transition. Or let's say by the data fetching libraries, they might be using the start transition API. The use deferred is basically giving you a control of giving you a deferred version of some state value. So basically, let's say you are updating some list and you are showing some list in the UI which has some expensive operation going on, or you are showing it on some slow devices. So this is might be using use deferred value. So yeah, these are the major concurrent features which are coming in, and I think one of the interesting thing is that till now, I guess whenever we want to have a better UX, when we have some expensive operation, we use generally do a debounce or a set timeout kind of things to make sure that the UI doesn't lag. And with these concurrent features, start transition and use deferred value, those kind of hacks are not needed anymore. It's kind of a focused on improving the UX to a great extent by the React team. So yeah, I think once the beta release is already out, so more and more application developers will be able to try it out and share feedback. So I think let's wait for the next release, the RC, and I think that will be a great update.
Amazing. Well, I want to kind of shift us into kind of the open discussion part of State of React, because we love to hear all of your general thoughts on what's happening in the ecosystem with the community. And the first question we kind of wanted to kind of throw out there and start a discussion around is there's been a big trend this year of React frameworks, and there's been a lot of new kind of general changes to how we've been developing React. We've had major improvements to a lot of the existing frameworks like Next.js, Gatsby, Redwood. But we're also seeing new frameworks pop out. Remix, for instance. Astro is another one that's been coming up. What is, if anybody has thoughts on this, what are y'all's thoughts on this particular trend in the ecosystem, and where do you think it's going to go in 2022?
I'm looking at Ben.
You guys are baiting me.
Mm-hmm.
Do it, Ben. Do it.
Sorry, Ben.
All right. So we were talking a little bit before. I think that the trend over 2022, 2023 is going to trend heavily towards full-featured frameworks, React or not, honestly, with considerations like edge rendering and pre-generated static renders and those sorts of things. Like there seems to be a new arms race building around those sorts of things, with like lots of very heavily funded startups and companies that are focused on efforts to build. And when I say framework, I do not mean UI framework. I mean comprehensive end-to-end solutions for how to build things that are very performant and really, really next level. And I mean very performant across the board, like as far as build time and deployment and fetching data and initial like time to first render. Like there's a lot of knowledge that has been built over the last 10 years or so about this, and it seems to be like converging into a single thing. So while all of that stuff was, I think, things that only big, huge companies with lots of infrastructure could attempt before, I think it's going to become something more and more people are going to have access to very easily because of open source technologies. So.
And I guess just to add to that as well, I love what you said about arms race, because I think that for a very long time, we were moving at a particular pace, and now things are speeding up, which is good, because when people bring in new ideas, we can all learn from each other, and then we can help make the web better. So from my point of view, it's one of those things where it's really good, and it's a very exciting time to be building for the web right now.
And I think you're totally right. And I think the people that are most going to profit from this is obviously the community, because always when you have different solutions trying to go towards the same goal or trying to solve the same problem, then you get one solution and then some others get maybe inspired by it, build the next solution. I wouldn't maybe call it an arms race, but it might be just different solutions pushing each other towards, who can bring the best solution that they think they have, and then somebody else is going to invent something new, and then it's always going to get better. And the people profiting is everybody, because we're all just getting better open source software to use and lots of different options around. So yeah, I think it's very exciting times, even though it has been a little bit, I think, quiet. Maybe in the last years, I think now it's really getting, also from React, version 17, no changes, right? So no new features. That was the headline, and it was kind of going a bit slow. But now with 18, it's going to get a lot of good stuff.
I think on the topic of frameworks, where most of us have been in this industry for a while now, I feel like 6 years ago, I was experiencing the same amount of excitement that I am today, but just with a different tool chain. if you were around 6 years ago, it was all about SSG. You know, it was just like, who has got the best static site generation framework? And you know, Gatsby was raising money like crazy, and Next was just really starting to take off. And I even tried my hand as a little solo OSS dev doing React Static, and you know, I was like, I cannot compete in this game. Got out of there real quick, but it was so exciting because you know, it was this new frontier of how far can we push SSG, and I get those same vibes. History kind of rhymes a little bit, and today it's that same thing, but like what you said, Ben, with edge computing, and you know, servers are getting cheap, and edge computing is getting cheap, and we're pushing all of those standards and those expectations we have of our applications out to the edge now, and it's kind of like a renaissance of both newcomers, new frameworks like Remix, and frameworks that have been around like Next. You know, there's going to be new ones, like you said. People are going to have to adapt. It's really exciting, though. I'm just really excited about Remix and Next and Blitz and Redwood. Just all of these frameworks. I've never been more excited about the competition they're bringing together. You know, easily a magnitude more excited than I was 6 years ago about SSG. So.
Before we started, I think, Ben, you alluded to potentially, I don't know how true this is or if it was all speculation, but you know, there might be tools or frameworks where you could say it doesn't matter which JavaScript framework you use, it could be React or Vue, but it could support both. And so that made me think maybe there is a world where let's say you acquire a company that is using Angular, but our company is using React in our code base, and you can just seamlessly kind of integrate the two, like they can just snap into each other because it doesn't really matter which JavaScript framework you're using. So I think right now I see a big problem with how disparate a lot of the tech space has to be, because you have to stick with a specific framework in order to do certain things, or certain things are only supported for certain frameworks. So maybe I see a world where a lot more of that is able to be done together, or agnostic of whatever JavaScript framework you use. Like JavaScript is just JavaScript at the bottom of everything.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like the big thing is that nowadays, almost everything you use, with a few exceptions, it has some pre-compilation step. Usually TypeScript is involved. Even like, so Angular, for example, their templates are literally transformed into TypeScript, and then that's additionally transformed on top of that with, you know, all of your backend stuff. And I know because I worked on some of that stuff. So you look at what's possible, and I mean, I can tell you definitively, it's possible to take a template like Angular and compile it into a React component, right? Like it's like what's actually compiled into is a thing that looks kind of like hooks under the hood. And there's companies out there that, again, are heavily funded startups. You've got Vercel, you've got Cloudflare, Netlify, these groups where, you know, if you're Cloudflare example, I'm not saying that Cloudflare told me anything like this, but it behooves you to be like, oh, I can do this for you. I can make this stuff fast for you. We've got build tools that will handle this exact sort of problem. So if you're deploying these two things next together, that it all seems seamless and it still performs well. And, you know, because it's a real issue that comes up, and it's, you know, it's a way that some of these companies can get big enterprise clients that have this problem, right? So the thing is like the whole, I feel like the entire stack is maturing. So like before we had like, we had jQuery, and then you look at a more mature jQuery, you had AngularJS, right? Where it was like, okay, well, we had jQuery, but now we've got this solution that thinks a little bit more about how people want to componentize stuff. All right. And then you move on from that, and all of a sudden you have React, where it's like, well, we learned a little bit from that, and now we're like, well, what if we were trying to do something more like PHP, where we're rendering stuff with JavaScript or whatever? And then someone's like, well, what about if we used this and did like applied some rules to it and did some static site generation stuff, right? So you've got your Gatsby's and your Next.js pop up, and then like, so you can see it's starting to eat the world from the front to the back. And now we're at this stage where it's, you know, there's, you know, edge functions and lambdas and these things. and people are trying to, they're getting to where that stuff has been integrated. And you've got this entire stack now where they're looking, there's companies where it's their business and they're well funded to do it, to look at the entire stack and the entire problem and see how they want to solve that for other people. Where the owners of that before, Google doesn't have that problem, right? Like Google solved the entire backend side of it and a lot of other things in other ways that aren't necessarily public, right? Facebook, same thing. So like this new, I think the new thing with these new startups that are coming up that have these, brilliant people working for them, and these mature products that are starting to pull in and also open source a lot of these interesting solutions. Yeah, we're gonna see some really cool stuff these next few years.
Speaking of build tools, something that I was very excited about from ReactConf was the talk React without memo. Ever since the React team introduced hooks, we've been complaining about having to specifically call, use memo and use callback ourselves, try to optimize our components. And the React team has been insisting that someday there might be a magical compiler that will handle inserting all the dependencies and handling all that stuff for us. And they had worked on some other projects like Prepack, where they were trying to kind of pre-compile your entire JavaScript code base and your React components into a completely different form. And that didn't quite pan out. And it really didn't look like this magical compiler would ever actually show up. Well, apparently they are actually legitimately working on a tool called React Forget, which, based on the examples in the discussion, looks like it's supposed to try to be able to optimize the contents of your components during the build step, not just to insert dependency arrays for use memo and use callback, but actually to optimize all the calculations in your component, including the JSX elements that are returned. And that's actually a very important thing, because React has a little known optimization where if a component returns the exact same element references as last time, React will skip re-rendering the child components. It's almost like the parent controlling a React.memo wrapper for the child. And so if this idea pans out, it really might kind of solve some of the annoying things we have to do to get better performance in larger React apps. So per the discussion, they're working on it. They've got proof of concept. They're going to try it out inside of Facebook, Meta, whatever it is we're calling it these days, and see if they can get it to work at their scale, and if so, actually fully release that. So I'm very, very excited to see how that turns out.
I think also Dashi tried out this approach in one of his stored libraries. I don't recall which one, but I saw one of the tweets where he was trying out this React without memo approach in one of the stored libraries.
Yeah, I think I know. I think I saw the tweet you're talking about. It's kind of like he put like all the logic for rendering inside of one of his proxy libraries or something.
Yeah, right, yeah.
I know this is state of React, but like one thing I have seen is that Vue 3 and Svelte are eerily similar now, right? Like they're exactly what you're talking about. There's in particular Vue 3, there's this idea of hooks, but there's no use memo necessary. There's no use callback necessary. Like it's the same. They basically are taking the same sort of idea of hooks from React, but kind of getting rid of some of but it's the compilation step. So I'm very curious to see if that's going to be the case. And then the other thing that is interesting to me is like they're so similar that's another reason that I wonder if we're going to start seeing, like, I wonder if you can build a compiler that could do any of these things. Like it's super interesting.
Yeah, and I also was just reading about Solid. I don't know if any of you have looked into Solid too, but again, the concepts that Solid is implementing, like actual reactive programming, right? Just super genius and smart. And you can kind of see some of the similarities in the reactive model that's being built up by these compilers. And I definitely think it's going to be a trend, maybe not next year fully, but over the next couple of years. I think we're definitely going to see more work being done by compilers. React is just getting started, in my opinion.
Here I'm going to be mildly annoying because I'm the RxJS guy, but what's really interesting is the like what Vue is using under the hood is it's like a behavior subject sort of thing where it pushes like, hey, something's changed, and then you pull the value out of it, right? The Svelte is literally using observables so similarly shaped that you can use RxJS observables under the hood directly. Relay, which I don't know, like it seems like Relay, I can't tell if it's still popular. Like I don't see it that often, but it was wildly popular when React first took off. It literally had like a carbon copy of RxJS's observable under the hood with a few new features. And what you're seeing when you're saying things are using real reactive programming under the hood, if you go in and you dig at these types, because I do, like ultimately you're seeing that every one of these libraries is either inventing a new observable or inventing something very similar to observable. And I'm really hopeful that inevitably the TC39 starts to recognize that everyone keeps inventing the same primitive over and over and over again because it doesn't exist in the language. And they put me out of a job would be great. Like I don't need to be the sole owner of the most popular implementation of observable. That's ridiculous. That should belong to the browser implementers. And it's just like, this is everywhere. And we have every other async type you can imagine, including very complicated ones like async iterable, push base thing. So yeah, I'd be shocked if something didn't come out of this on the React side that was also very similar in shape, because it's such a simple, like anyone that tries to come up with an idea around this inevitably is like, oh, what if I just had this thing that, I can subscribe to or get events off of, and then I can like it's a very primitive thing. So yeah, waiting to see it.
Do you know if any conversations around that kind of thing have happened with any like browser vendors or Node.js or TC39?
So there's a TC39 proposal that's been up for like 6 years. It's sitting at stage 1. It is not canceled by any stretch of the imagination. There are people on the TC39 that are interested in pushing it through. The problem is the way that the TC39 is structured. You need a sponsor and you need a paying company kind of to be involved. And they'll tell you you don't need a paying company to be involved. But the truth is, it's a lot of work. It's not something someone can just kind of wing out in their free time, really. So, whether or not that gets through. And then, of course, there's a lot of red tape. Now, on the browser side, I was asked a long time ago when I worked at Google to propose this. And I was asked by the Chrome team, actually, to propose adding observables to the DOM as like, for event targets. So instead of saying add event listener, you could say on click, and then you get back an observable, right? And the thing with that is, for the wet wig, you need 2 browser implementers to be interested in adding that. And this was before Edge became Chromium based. So Chrome was interested and they had someone to implement it, and Edge was not interested because, they're busy like building a browser and you don't want to add something new to their plate is, I think, the main reason. So had just been proposed like a year or 2 later, then we would have had 2 implementers interested because it's going in the same implementation. It's being kicked around. The big thing is getting one of these big companies to kind of like throw their weight into it so they can get it out.
Well, we're running a little low on time, but I want to ask one more question. Maybe we could do kind of a around the room if we were in a physical room, but you know what I'm saying. With React Conf being last week, a lot of amazing announcements. What were some of your personal favorite announcements that happened last week? What are you getting really excited about? Maybe we'll start with Shaundai and work around.
Well, of course, I have to pick the suspense architecture because that was what my talk was on. But I also am really excited. I'm excited about React 18 overall. The approach that the React team took to not only just very thoughtful decisions in the priorities and the things that they chose to put in this new release, but also the way that they strategically did it and asked for feedback from folks. They chose people for the React 18 working group and allowed us to like give our feedback, but also solicit feedback from the community. And there were changes, and they just approached it really well. So I'm excited about suspense architecture. I'm excited about automatic batching. And I just love React. So I'm here to use it. I'm here to use it wherever I can. I mean, it's my job. That's me.
Oh, what about you? Yeah. There we go.
Okay, cool. So I have, I guess, two main things. The first one is the new React docs. You can tell that a lot of love and care has gone into the docs, and Rachel and Dan have done an exceptional job. I remember when I was first learning React, reading the React docs and just feeling completely lost. And I think that the new docs will really help lower the barrier, especially for newcomers. So I'm very excited about that. And then React server streaming is something that I'm also excited about, because I think it will improve the user experience. If you think about, the mechanics and how it works, what we want to do as developers is we want to build applications that will help our users and that will give them a good experience. And I think that server streaming will really help improve that if we learn how to use it properly and wisely. So yeah, really looking forward to those two things.
I'm glad you said the React docs. It was I got to work with Rachel on that project.
Oh, yeah?
She's incredible to work with because of her intent in making sure it was the right experience for the community.
Mm-hmm.
And the fact that we got to build it in React with new MDX components and the like just made it a wonderful experience. Anyway, I'll keep the flow moving. Aakansha.
Yeah, I'm really excited about server streaming is a common favorite of everyone. So that's of course there. Selective hydration, because that's going to improve the user experience to a great extent. Also, like when it comes to the application developers, I think we will be also waiting for suspense with data fetching integration, because that's where we will be able to take the main advantage of server streaming. So I think as the team announced, Relay would be anyways there. Like application developers who are using Relay, they will get this full feature out of the box. But yeah, for other libraries, probably server components will also be released with a minor version. But yeah, for other data fetching libraries, it would take some time. So that's where I think application developers might have to wait a little. Again, I think style components also might need some update when it comes to supporting concurrent rendering with SSR and selective hydration, so that the style sheets needs to be inserted in the proper at the right time. So I think that's where these are the interesting when it comes to upgrading your application to React 18, and when you get when you see the difference, like what it was before and after you upgrade, we are just imagining, okay, these things will improve. But yeah, when we'll be comparing that, okay, this is the change we are getting, and the TTI will improve to a great extent. So yeah, I think that's what excites me a lot. And plus, of course, since concurrent features are opt-in, so yeah, I would want to try it out in parts of the applications to see how it actually improves the user experience overall. I think now, Dustin, you are muted, I guess.
Of course, I forgot to unmute this time. I was saying, Tanner, would you like to go next?
Yeah, sure. I didn't get to watch ReactConf. I was in Disneyland with my family, just loving it with my kids are going on all the rides. So I didn't get to watch. It's on my to-do list. But I did hear about a lot of the announcements. Honestly, the thing that caught my attention the most was the the sneak peek at the compiler. The possibilities that it opens up, like we were just talking about, is it's amazing what it could be with just a little bit of work. Beyond that, beyond ReactConf, I'm just really excited about a lot of the announcements around, Vercel, the people that Vercel's hiring, Remix, Blitz, and yeah, like the framework space is very interesting to me right now. And they're also announcing a lot of things. It seems like Remix is hiring somebody new every day. Kind of just want to wake up and like, okay, who's it going to be today? So yeah, it's just an overall excitement for the movement that's happening in the ecosystem and the great relationships that a lot of these organizations and people have within the ecosystem. I think it's important that we don't forget that we all might be competing tools. Me and Mark, we've got a very awesome relationship. It's like RTK query and React query. It's like where would these tools be without each other, though? And it's the same thing for Next and Remix and React, working with all the tools in the ecosystem. I just love it here, and I can't wait to see what's coming next, what we're going to be able to do together. The web is getting really good.
Mark?
Like I said, I already mentioned the React for Get memoizing compiler, but the other thing I would emphasize is the new docs. I'm a very big documentation person myself. I've written far too many words of docs over the last several years, and it was kind of difficult for me as someone who spends a lot of time answering questions to have to tell people either don't look at the React docs or actually look at this third-person copy of the React docs that switched all the examples to use function components and hooks. And they're working on a rewrite. It'll happen eventually, maybe. And so to see the beta of that finally go live and to see just how good the new tutorials are has been fantastic. Like we already regularly point people to the beta docs over in like React Flux or Stack Overflow when we're answering questions. So I'm really excited to see what they've got so far. I'm really excited to see how they'll continue fleshing it out. I do note that the tutorial so far does not cover use effect. I really want to see how they end up covering that one. But that's the biggest other thing that stands out to me.
Ian?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited about the availability of suspense. I think that's gonna, just really make writing like complex applications with, managing multiple loading states and things like that. Like, I'm really excited about how that's gonna, I think, simplify a lot of apps. Other than that, just from the conversation today, I also didn't catch all of ReactConf, so this deferred rendering thing is really interesting to me, and I'm curious how that maybe plays with GraphQL's deferred data directives. Really excited to see what different frameworks and libraries are able to build on top of all of these new React features. I think that's going to be really exciting.
Dom?
Yeah, is there anything left that hasn't been mentioned? I also didn't get around to watch it entirely, actually. But what I've spent already a lot of time in is with the new use sync external store hook, which we're also going to use in ReactQuery when we are going to make it ready for React 18, which we already have a draft PR for. Maybe it will make it into version 4. Depends on when React 18 then actually becomes stable. Otherwise, it will be the version after that. And also partly because I kind of feel a bit responsible for this hook or the rename, because some somewhat angry tweet of mine got to use the old one, the use mutable source, I think it was called. It triggered a bit of a discussion in the working group, and then the API was changed and the hook was renamed. And I think it's really good now, and tried it out already. Makes it so much easier for us to work with this. And then also all the other features that go with suspense for data fetching, how that will turn out, how we with our library can integrate with a suspense cache. We do have support for the experimental suspense for data fetching feature, but not with an actual cache that comes from suspense. So really also looking forward to how this will improve this space.
I tried to get the hook rename to use DOM, but it would have been confusing.
There's this, it's like, but it also muted. Yeah, it's maybe, yeah.
Interesting side fact. So after you and I had that discussion on Twitter, Dan actually pinged me on the side and told me to file the comment over in the working group. And so I did that. And that was what led to the discussions back and forth on what use cases do we need to cover? Do selectors have to be memoized? All this other stuff. And that in turn led to Andrew saying, okay, well, we've thought about it. We'll recreate the hook from scratch to better solve the use cases. And then he and I went back and forth on what things it needed to cover. So you're welcome. I was your alpha tester.
Yeah, but he also reached out to me, by the way. I was really surprised to see, oh my God, what did I do? Did I kind of, my tweet kind of got unwanted attention, actually. It was really, yeah, not used to that at all.
We'll wrap us up. Ben, any thoughts on ReactConf from last week?
Well, I didn't watch really any of it, but I did catch up. No, that's not true. I caught up with some of it, but the thing I'm probably most excited about would be React Forget. Like I've always been kind of ho hum on suspense, if I'm honest. But I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
Fine.
Yeah. It's only because I feel like that's a problem that I've had to solve a bunch of times. So maybe I bet that suspense is probably going to be one of those things that surprises me. Like, actually, I do really like this. But I React Forget is really interesting to me because I view the proliferation of use memo and use callback and the laziness of people that don't want to do that as kind of React having their bloomers showing all the time, right? Like here's an underpinning of how things work, and you kind of have to know that bit. And it's interesting to me because RxJS has similar issues where people have to know things about what is a switch map and all these other weird recipes and stuff. So I'm interested to see how all of that shakes out and how it improves the ecosystem and hopefully makes people make fewer silly mistakes with the kind of the reactivity of what's going on with hooks. So
awesome. Well, thank you all for sharing, and thank you all for coming today, both our panelists and our audience. It's been a real pleasure having you all today. Been really exciting talking about React today, and we're excited to see you at the next one.